to the latest episode of my community podcast, In Conversation with Nickie Aiken. These podcast episodes focus on the important issues affecting people living and working in the two cities. You can listen to the podcast episode and all the other episodes in your usual places such as Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. And if you do enjoy listening to them, please hit subscribe and rate it. That means like it. Today, we are talking about the rise in online scams and fraud. Joining me to discuss this growing issue is Peter Tutton, who is the Head of Policy, Research and Public Affairs at the debt charity StepChange.
Hi, Nickie. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Now, I've become aware of online scams more and more because I, like so many people, receive texts from organisations such as Royal Mail or Netflix or HMRC and many others. They are fake. They are scammers pretending to be these organisations. And I also get so many emails. And it's really important that we all become much more aware of our online security. Online scams figures are really stark. £135 million was lost in investment scams alone last year, 2020. Some people losing their entire life savings. 21 million was lost in dating scams, people going on to these dating websites and meeting people who aren't who they say they are, and they take their money. And 57 million in purchase scams on things like fake shopping accounts or even fake accounts on places like eBay. People pay for goods in advance and then they never receive them. And this is the type of growing crime, and it is a crime. I firmly believe that our online security has got to mirror our physical security. You know, we lock our windows, we lock our car doors. We've got to do the same now, ensuring that we're safe online. And Peter, I'm really delighted that you've joined me today because I know the brilliant work that StepChange does day in, day out for people who find themselves in debt for a series of reasons. But I think online scams is now becoming more prevalent and people are losing more money and getting into debt. From the work that you do at StepChange, what sort of impact are online scams having on victims?
Well, the first thing to say is we see people, because there's people, when people are struggling in debt, they're dealing with financial difficulty. So they're financially vulnerable. They can't really stand very much in a way of a loss. And secondly, people are often highly emotionally vulnerable, stressed. They've got lots of different things coming in at once. Perhaps, are doing lots of online searching for things like loans and other things to try and manage through to payday, manage through to the next month. You put those things together and where there are firms out there who are seeking to exploit and take advantage of vulnerable people, the lack of control of online advertising, whether it's for things like investments or credit applications, or indeed debt advice and debt advice providers, is leaving people who are vulnerable open to abuse. Thing we're particularly concerned about is a lot of people these days seek their debt advice online, and we and other providers do digital debt advice. But one of the problems we have there is if you Google, say, StepChange or another debt advice charity, or put it into another search engine or ads that come up in social media, what you find is there are providers, what are called lead generators, who use our name name and our branding. I've even had my image used, like
Wow.
to not that that's necessarily got very high marketing value, but use these things to mislead people into thinking they're dealing with a debt advice charity when actually they're not. They're a commercial lead generator, and they are solely interested in harvesting someone's details and then pushing them to a provider. Now, we've seen cases where people who thought they were contacting us, were not contacting us. They were contacting a lead generator and then pushed maybe to another organisation where they've had poor advice with a provider they didn't even know they were with, or in some cases have been scammed, have been making payments to, thinking they were paying off their debts, but actually were being scammed. The difficulty here is that we make, we've got one of my colleagues who sits in Leeds, spends a huge amount of his time playing whack-a-mole, asking the authorities, asking the search engine providers to take down and deal with it, but you take one down and another one pops up again. So without a framework of really kind of tough regulation and someone whose job it is to stop this happening at source, we'll forever be playing whack-a-mole with these things. And the worry is that people who are seeking debt advice will forever be exposed to harm.
Do you think that's why it's really important that we try to secure legislation? We've got the online safety bill about to come into Parliament for us to start debating and hopefully working across party to ensure that it becomes law. Do you think it's really important that we include legislation to protect people from online scams and fraud?
I think it's essential. It's, an online safety bill is really important. I think we all know that, but leaving out a major source of harm, which could be controlled by legislation much better than it's being controlled at the moment, would be a terrible missed opportunity. I mean, and it's not just me, we have a particular interest in this, that we see people by misleading scammers and misleading adverts by lead generators causing harm, but also people like the Financial Conduct Authority have called for online advertising because they obviously deal with a huge amount of scams and financial harm. Your colleagues in the Treasury Committee calling for the same thing. So I think everyone who's looked at the issue of scams and financial harm and other forms of harm coming from online advertising has come to the conclusion that we need better controls and better ways of dealing and getting harmful advertisement taken down quickly. So it would be a massive missed opportunity if the online safety bill didn't include something on paid for online advertising.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been working with the City of London Police, who are the national lead for police services across the UK on fraud, and they're seeing a massive increase in online fraud and scams. So look, I'm doing all I can to lobby the government to ensure that there is space in this huge bill already, because I think you're right, it would be a missed opportunity. In your line of work and the brilliant work that StepChange does, how are you seeing more people coming to you for debt advice because they've been scammed online?
We're not seeing a huge increase necessarily of people. It will be part of it, but I mean, we see so many people. We see hundreds of thousands of people a year, and the reasons for why they're coming to us are often quite complicated, but usually are triggered for something like a change in circumstances, work change, illness, something like that. But certainly, in the past, we've seen things like advanced fee frauds for credit. So people who are desperate, who are looking for a source of credit, think they're going to a site where they're going to get a loan and it asks for a fee to apply, and then that's a scam. So these things have been going on for a while, and in some cases, some scams have been going on for years. I mean, the problem is that kind of with more and more digital services, it's sort of easier for scammers to do it. It's very easy to set up a website. It's very easy to set yourself up as an unregulated lead generator. And with more people seeking services online, the more exposed they are. So we tend to notice this in terms of people mainly who are seeking debt advice and the problems they have. But there will be a proportion of our clients who would have been exposed to scams and exposed to harm as a result of online advertising.
What type of money are we talking about that people can be losing? I mean, are we talking tens of thousands of pounds? What's the average loss in your experience?
I mean, that's hard to say in terms of an average loss, and where we do have some figures is, you know, sort of so the Financial Conduct Authority recently released support on what's called debt packages, and these are people. So you have a lead generator who does some of whom, you know, this is where we're seeing the misleading on the online paid for online advertisement. They then sell that lead to a debt packager, some of whom are FCA regulated, who then sell it to a solution provider, often for a thing called an individual voluntary arrangement. Now, the FCA say that the average sort of fees being paid in this chain were between sort of £500 and £1,300, and the result of that is a higher, you know, a cost to consumers where these things go wrong, and often leading into bad advice and possibly other financial harm. So that's just one example of the amount of money that's involved. That's not so much the loss from the scam, but it gives a sense of where you don't have control, the amount of money that's out there for scammers. Even if they're not actually illegally taking your money, they're using illegal and misleading advertising to get your details, which have a value in themselves, to sell them on to a provider. That in itself can end up in thousands of pounds, that if with a thing with an individual voluntary arrangement, if it falls over, those costs all fall on the consumer who took it out. So that's a sort of simple example. That's without kind of absolute, you know, illegality and kind of we are out to steal your money. That is just bad control of online advertisement by intermediaries who are making misleading claims to get people to buy a service.
And so how does then StepChange help somebody who gets themselves into this situation? You know, they've found that they've been scammed, but from their for their life savings, and you know, they're desperate. Where do you come in?
So obviously there's lots of difficulties there, and one of the things, you know, redress can be difficult in the case of scams, and there is bits and pieces in the online safety bill on redress. So there are some bits there, particularly where that scam has been done by sort of financial service providers who maybe are sort of are or aren't outside the FCA's perimeter. Better redress to get the money back would be good, which is something that we can sort of help people with. But if there isn't an easy route to redress, then that's very hard to do. So often where people are experiencing have experienced a scam or really any sort of financial shock, what we will do is we will help people deal with the debts that they have to deal with. So, you know, people may suffer a loss and then they may use credit and things like that to try and cope with the loss. By the time people get to us, they have often got quite a lot of debt, are very stressed out, don't know what to do next, maybe have been experiencing hardship for a number of months because they've been living hand to mouth and you know, and so on. So what we'll do there is we'll try and get people, you know, help people stabilize their finances, work out, get them to a place where they can afford the essentials, and then work with them either to negotiate with their creditors for repayments or to get to a place where there's various different debt solutions that people can do, and we will help people understand what the best solution is for them. So if you find yourself in debt as a result of a scam, it can be difficult to get redress, but if where you are as a result of that scam is in financial difficulty, there is help there, free confidential help from StepChange and other debt charities that can help people deal with those debts in a way that will relieve the stress, will get people hopefully back on track, and will get people in a position where they're kind of able to afford their essentials and aren't constantly juggling bills just to make ends meet.
I know from my own experience of helping people with debt problems and you know, working with StepChange with those people, that once you have a debt management plan in place, although you've still got the debt and you've still got to pay it off, from my experience, it's a huge burden, it feels, off your shoulders, that you have got a plan. And I think from speaking to people who've been involved, that, you know, it's that ongoing credit that, you know, they can never pay off their credit card or their loans because the interest is there and it's just crippling. So, you know, I think the work that you guys do and other debt charities is so vital. It helps, you know, obviously the physical issue of your debt, but I think also your mental health issues, and that can turn into physical health problems as well. So thank you for everything you do. Peter, before we finish, are there any tips that you can offer us today to help protect us from any online scams or fraud? You know, we know these guys who, the criminals, are very, very sophisticated. They're always changing the way they target people. But are there any straightforward or simple guidelines that you would, or tips that you would offer that you perhaps use yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things. I mean, firstly, kind of, you know, be wary. As I say, if it looks too good to be true, it often is. Those kind of things. I mean, who is it? Who are you talking to? So things like when you see websites, and when I follow up lead generator websites, you know, if I can't find contact details and like the kind of, it's all a bit opaque as to who they are, then it's probably a bit iffy. Just things like if it doesn't look right, you know, if the language doesn't look right, if it's be wary. With things like financial services, the Financial Conduct Authority has a register of authorized providers that you can search. So if it's something to do with finances, investment or credit or debt management, anything like that, have a look at the FCA's site and see, is this firm's name on there? Do they have a registration number? So there are some things to look for. You know, it's sometimes worth looking through the privacy notice and things like that to kind of see, well, who's behind this? If you can, I know this is all difficult stuff to do, but there are some things to do. Look at it. Does it sort of add up? Is it ambiguous as to who you're dealing with? If it's financial services, check the FCA register. Those are some of the sort of things that people can do. And I think the last thing is, in particular, when people say are in financial difficulty and you're trying to, you know, look at something online that might be a way out, just always take a step back, you know, think about this. Is this thing right for me? Does this look right? Don't necessarily look at the first ad that comes up on the Google search page, because the ones at the top are often and can sometimes be the ones that are the misleading lead generators and so on. So look down, take a bit of time. You don't have to rush into these things. So that's the sort of way that I think about it when I'm looking at these things and trying to spot what's a dodgy site and what's a good site.
And if they want help from you yourselves, you've got your website, StepChange.
That's right. StepChange.org. Yeah. So have a look. Where on, as I say, we'll come up. Often not right at the top, but look down, we'll be there. And very much urge anyone who's listening to this, watching this, is worrying about their finances, worrying about financial difficulty, get help early. Because if you get help early, then all that stress that builds up over time, maybe you can head some of it off. And you're absolutely right, Nickie. You know, debt isn't just about money; it's about well-being, and it's about mental health and physical health, and what happens to people when that mental health gets under massive pressure. So, yeah, look us up online and get help if you need it.
So StepChange.org. And I think also, you know, obviously we're here talking about the big financial scams that people can fall victim to, particularly online. The financial services like not like loans, but like, I guess loans, but also investments. People saying, you know, improve your pension, or, you know, 7% return. And as you say, it is usually far too good to be true. But there's also the other scams. Things like having an email saying your parcel, the Royal Mail, you need to pay an extra £2 or £3 and click on this link. I had one literally last week from pretending to be from Netflix, and because I just changed my Netflix account over, I suddenly thought this could be bona fide, but I was not 100% convinced. So I really looked at it, and I scrolled down and found a telephone number, and it was a 007 number, which I've never heard of. So I googled 007 and it came up as a Russian dial code. So I knew immediately it was obviously dodgy. But it's things like that, and I think we've really got to get used to and getting much cleverer about check before you click, really.
Yeah, and scams will often work on, you know, it's about encouraging people to quickly do something, to respond to something quickly. And that's the difficulty. If you do kind of follow the link or ring up, you start talking to someone, then they're going to pressure you even more.
Yeah.
So I think that is the best advice. Look at it, if it's an email, or look at the link. Does the email look right? Does it look wrong? If there's any other information there, check it out. I mean, there are things we can do. It is difficult, we need to recognize it's difficult, which is why we need legislation. This isn't something that individuals can always get right by ourselves, and particularly people who are vulnerable through various different reasons, including financial pressure. So there are things that people can do, but ultimately that kind of shield and protection from effective legislation, that is empowering sort of regulators and allowing kind of Ofcom and other people to challenge and take down quickly, making the tech providers take down advertisements quickly. That's what we need. Consumers need that assurance and protection that someone's looking out for them.
So I can promise you, Peter, I will continue to work to persuade the government to strengthen the online safety bill to include online scams, because as we've discussed today, I can't promise anything, but it is such a huge growth crime, and people are suffering, and we do need to have tougher laws so that we can protect people and equally bring those who are guilty of peddling such crimes to justice if we can. So thank you so much for your time today, Peter, and thanks to StepChange for all the brilliant work you do. We are all so grateful for having debt charities like yours. Sadly, we have to have them, but anybody who's listening or watching this podcast, please do seek help if you do find yourself in such debt and having financial difficulties. And for anybody else out there, please do check. If you get a suspicious email, if you see a suspicious text, or you are seeing strange ads on the internet and offering amazing deals, please do think before you click. Thanks so much, Peter.
Thank you.